Welcome to Kibbe on Liberty. Robby, how's it going?
I'm doing great. Good to see you.
Yeah. So it's you have been on the front lines of this entire conversation about tech censorship and government agencies badgering platforms. Specifically, I guess Facebook is something that you focused on. But there's so much going on now, and it gets to the heart of this libertarian debate that's going on, or limited government conservatives, all these guys. What do we do about big tech censorship? And I think a lot of people sort of lead with their emotions instead of what they know about letting government into these sorts of things. So I wanted to dig into all that. But let's start with the news of this week, which is really about, what do we do about TikTok? China, is it a nominally private company that is in effect financed or controlled by the CCP? Is that what TikTok is?
It's not so much the financing. It's just that as a Chinese company, it operates under different rules and at the end of the day can be beholden to the CCP in terms of the content that appears on the platform. Now, you can find, if you go on TikTok, you can find criticism of the Chinese government. You can find videos about Tiananmen Square and all that. It's just they might take it down because the Chinese government wants them to. They might minimize, and I think there's some evidence they did in early COVID days. They didn't want you speculating about it, that sort of thing. And then there's also the question of the Chinese government's access to data collected through TikTok, because we don't have, it doesn't have to operate under the same kind of American rules. So I appreciate all these criticisms of TikTok. And then I think there's some off-the-wall criticisms, the whole, social media is harming kids. That's a bigger conversation. I don't see any evidence that TikTok is any worse an offender than other platforms. And I think some of the evidence on the whole on that front has been overstated in terms of moral panic. Not to say there's nothing there, but
it seems like the Chinese model, it's not really communism or socialism in any technical meaning of the term. But when you dig into the social credit system, you discover that all of those tools that they use, the banking system and the monitoring of the lives of Chinese citizens, this is at least nominally implemented by private corporations that are controlled by the government. So that, that's probably closer to what we call fascism in the technical sense. But it's, I suspect, not knowing, TikTok sounds like the same thing. Lots of government control, but nominally not a government entity.
Right. And people who are critical of TikTok will point out that in China, the version of TikTok that's available in China is nothing like the version available here. It's children's ability to use it, young people's ability to use it is greatly restricted. It's a lot of content on being a good citizen, that sort of thing. But that makes me turn around and go, well, yeah, they're doing that because they're tyrannical. They don't have a free country. They don't have the First Amendment. They don't have a culture of freedom of speech. As as a red-blooded American patriot, I wouldn't want to bring that regime into America. I would leave these kinds of decisions to parents and families and communities, rather than what they're trying to do now is ban the app outright, which that's one thing. And then the authority to do that, because the government needs to claim for itself this new authority, is very scary, and I think could be used, easily weaponized in a Patriot Act style. And I'm not the only one saying this. Senator Rand Paul had a great op-ed about this week. Tucker Carlson actually is sounding the alarm on this as well. People understand how this will be weaponized against our speech, which, by the way, as you alluded to in your opening remarks, is already happening. And, for all the concerns about Chinese government-based censorship on TikTok, I hate to break it to you, the same kind of influence in terms of content, the American government has been doing that to Twitter, to Facebook, to Google, YouTube, etc. I've seen the emails. They've been revealed, and part of the great reporting people like Matt Kibbe have done. It's pervasive and terrifying.
Yeah. Is there a way, because, and I want to talk about this horrific Restrict Act, which is basically the Patriot Act on steroids, but targeting the speech and thinking of American citizens. But is there a simpler way to like, can the government just target a company and say, you're not allowed here? I don't even know the answer to that. I suspect it's semi-unconstitutional,
Yes.
but that in no way stops them from doing it anyway.
Exactly that. No, there is, I don't think any, people like Justin Amash will raise this issue all the time, that laws should not target specific companies. There should be regulations that all companies have to abide by, but a targeted takedown of TikTok would, I think, certainly be unconstitutional. They're trying to come up with the authority for doing it. They'll say that, like, it's akin to a foreign media property operating within the U.S. I mean, look at all the actions that were taken against Russia Today, for example, as a result of the Russia-Ukraine war. I think this is, again, a dangerous territory to go down, and I don't see the evidence that the censorship on TikTok, while very bad, is worse than what is happening on the American-owned platforms at the government's behest. And I'm not someone who's going to say that, like, oh, we're just as bad as China. So I don't believe that. The Chinese government is authoritarian. It doesn't give its people political rights.
We're just aspiring to be as bad as them.
Yes. And we shouldn't want to go down that path. And that's exactly what we're going down with this Restrict Act. And unfortunately, it's a path we've already been going down during the pandemic, as a result of the 2016 election, as a result of the 2020 election.
So the Republicans, I did a quick search on the co-sponsors of the Restrict Act, and I won't get them all, but I noticed some of my favorite measures as to whether or not I categorically hate something, even though I haven't even tried to understand it, is I see Mitt Romney and Lindsey Graham as core co-sponsors of this, and it what we were just talking about, like, they can't just ban TikTok, and that probably doesn't stand up to constitutional scrutiny. So instead, they're going to give the state the power to target everything. And it seems to be incredibly sweeping. As you said, Rand Paul has talked about this. Tucker Carlson has talked about it. Interesting coalition. I watched your show. We should give a shout out to The Rising.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you and someone that comes from
Brianna
the left.
Joy Gray, very much a Bernie Sanders kind of leftist populist voice. So we quarrel all the time. We disagree on a lot of economic issues, labor issues. But the left has faced censorship as well at the hands of state, and kind of they face the contempt of the mainstream media is also something I would say that we have in common with them. So on a lot of tech, social media, speech issues, we're really we're aligned, and also it's helpful to make, because I don't want this to be a partisan persecution issue solely, because it's really about what the government has done is try to chill dissent on all sorts of topics from all sorts of directions.
Yeah.
There's a mainstream, liberal, progressive kind of ideology of the state and of many media corporations that libertarians, right populists, left populists don't fit neatly into and are often maligned by.
That coalition, and you pointed it out on the show, that AOC and some of her squad colleagues.
AOC, Rand Paul, Tucker Carlson all agreeing on something.
Yeah.
It sounds wild, but they have anti-authoritarian impulses on a lot of issues that they can recognize. They would recognize the war on terror going wrong with something that maybe your Mitt Romneys, your type of people signing off on this legislation, haven't learned that lesson.
That used to be more normal, by the way. You'd get that, like Thomas Massey would work with certain people that I guess we have to categorize on the far left. Rand Paul would do it. I remember Mike Lee and Bernie Sanders doing a great hearing on AUMF. Mm-hmm. And since Trump, a lot of those coalitions have sort of fallen apart. So it's kind of nice to see the left speaking up on this stuff, because in the old days, 3 or 4 years ago, you would expect the left to be help at least co-leading the charge, protecting civil liberties, and particularly when it comes to what we're allowed to think and what we're allowed to say in the public square. But that seems to have evaporated quite a bit during lockdowns and COVID. My
perception now, learning about the left from my co-host and from some of the guests we have on my show, Rising, which is for the publication The Hill, and I also work at Reason Magazine, where I do work on libertarian subjects. I've learned that the left had a real moment, and they've faced some of the kind of internal infighting that frustratingly has set back the libertarian movement at times as well, or the conservative movement. They faced a lot of that, and And yeah, they fell to some infighting. And COVID was, I think there are people on the left who went either way on COVID. There are still some people on the left who I disagree with a lot, but on COVID stuff, they appreciate the opportunity for greater authoritarianism that COVID provided. And then I think there are others in that direction who, very afraid of COVID, kind of defaulted to I guess we have to obey the public health consensus that kind of, I think it divided them a little bit.
At Kibbe on Liberty, freedom is a lifestyle 24/7, something you live and breathe and wear every day. If that describes you, you need the very best Liberty swag in the market today, just like this shirt I happen to be wearing. Go to freethepeople.org/KOL and check out our exciting merch. You too can love Liberty and look cool. Yeah. And maybe us as well.
Yeah, and us as well. Yeah, which I'm not putting them down saying they're divided. There's all sorts of divisions I deal with. I'm sure you do as well on a daily basis.
Well, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but I've been surprised at libertarians that were willing to accept lockdowns and insanely high levels of authoritarianism, because our instincts should have told us that was the wrong way to go. Kind of regardless of the threat, because I just don't think that centralized solutions work.
Absolutely.
Ever. And
yeah, it was. I mean, it was one of the largest opportunities for the state in our lifetime to seize more control at every level. I'm glad now that there is a lot more people speaking up everywhere and saying, wait, well, the things you told us a year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, don't even setting aside the principle, which we shouldn't, but even setting aside the principle, the things you said don't make any sense and haven't held up.
Yeah.
I hope people have learned that lesson to be, more militant, because that's how it went in 2001 and 2004, right? How could you be opposed to this military intervention? You're siding with it would be so crazy. All the experts, all the national security people say we have to do this, and the evidence is so compelling. How did that turn out?
And of course, the Patriot Act was a grab bag of things that they had tried to pass before.
Yes.
And they saw the opportunity to do that when everybody was freaked out and scared. And I feel like bringing this full circle to efforts to censor speech online, this is a set of tools that the surveillance state has wanted forever. And they're doing it. They have been doing it. But this sort of formalizes that. And it's fascinating to me that they're so blatant about it now. But I want to be white-pilled for a second, and then I want to get into all these things that will convince us that the world is going to end and we'll never get to speak freely again. But my take on the story that you revealed about the CDC dictating the terms of conversation about COVID to Facebook and the Twitter files more broadly have unveiled this massive surveillance state where they're reading our freaking Twitter posts, right? And even they don't even like our jokes, apparently, and they don't like us expressing opinions about anything. The fact that they've gone this far tells me that they're really freaked out about the democratized nature of speech through social media. So for all of the censorship that we all talk about, it strikes me that in a metaphysical sense, the good guys are winning because people have more voice. People have alternative sources of information, and the government that wants to tell us what to think and what to do is so freaked out about it, they did this massive clandestine censorship thing that we don't even know half of it yet. But I just hope that's unconstitutional. I don't know.
We should definitely appreciate that, as we bemoan censorship, we should definitely appreciate that our ability, our opportunity to speak, our platforms have increased so remarkably over the course of our lifetimes. The conversation taking place everywhere is more freewheeling and fun. It's less restricted. There's less gatekeeping than ever before in human history. What we're doing right now would have been difficult 10 years ago. It would have been impossible 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It was hard to speak in forums that were not expressly permitted by the institutional gatekeepers, the government, and the few media companies at the national level. It was TV, a couple newspapers, etc. There were whole eras where everyone was on the same page because it was only Walter Cronkite or some other person. And actually, people have a lot of fondness for that era that I think is totally misplaced.
Yeah.
You can manufacture consensus that way. You can have everyone agreeing to things that are wrong that way. Now, the fact that we don't agree is evident, and it can be bitter, it can be acrimonious, it can be in your face, it can be unpleasant. People can say things, they can believe things that are wrong, they can try to convince other people of things that are wrong. But, I believe in the free market of ideas. I think this is better. I think it's healthier for us. I'm so glad that social media has ended the guardrails. And so when I complain about the rules or what they've been forced to do, I am not complaining about them from the standpoint of, we need to get rid of social media or either break them up or change their liability so they can't operate. Those are suicidal ideas, honestly, from the standpoint of advancing alternative perspectives, and we should just stop with them. So part of realizing that, but I that was intention a little bit, maybe a year or two ago, when I'm seeing all the censorship and I'm seeing these companies make moderation decisions that really hurt us, and you have your kind of national conservatives saying, well, this shows that we need a firm hand to regulate them. But now we've learned that that was wrong. It's substantially wrong, because people in government have been pushing social media companies to make those decisions in like upwards of 90% of the cases. And that, you're right, that the curtain has been lifted on that. It is more pervasive than I would have guessed. Much more pervasive than I would have guessed. I knew that law enforcement had some contact with social media companies. I would not have guessed that the FBI agents were spending all their time flagging joke tweets for moderation. I would not have guessed that the CDC would be having daily conversations about what content they think on Facebook is harmful or could cause vaccine hesitancy. I didn't know that there were entire think tanks, NGOs that are State Department funded, who are putting together reports for advertisers about which websites, if they're a real patriot, they won't work with them.
Yeah.
All of that is happening. It is on an unprecedented and terrifying level, but our fight should be with the government funding, these specific agencies, not with the tech companies themselves are the last link in this chain. And you can be mad, you can be frustrated with them, but direct your ire in a productive direction, and that is at big government.
So I agree with that half, but let me see if I can build out sort of a public choice argument about incentives with government wanting to censor free thought and particularly dissonant opinions about everything from lockdowns to Ukraine. I guess is the latest thing, but I also think there's probably natural incentives that platform the bad actors in Twitter. So I'm more familiar with Twitter because I read a lot of the Twitter files, and it seemed like there were plenty of people saying, well, that's not what our rules say, and that's not a free speech thing, and those guys shouldn't be telling us what to do. But the people that dominated were the people that were like, hell yeah, let's do that and more. My theory, which is somewhat half-baked still, is that there is so much revenue, ad revenue, that comes into these companies from government agencies and their partners. Because when I go on, not Twitter so much anymore, but when I go on social media, I see ads from the CDC. I see ads from Pfizer, and I see ads primarily from producers of weapons of mass destruction. Mm-hmm. Lots of government contractors are spending all this. So I wonder if when they come in and censor, and you've documented the threats, right? Like this, we're actually going to hurt you if you don't ultimately do what we ask you to do. But do they even have to do that? Because so much of the money that's propping up these social media companies, the ad spend, is probably coming from this same ecosystem.
I don't know that that's the case. I don't know that the threats from the advertisers is the substantial motivation, because there's a lot of potential advertisers out there. I'm not saying it doesn't motivate their decisions, but my experience in media companies generally is that the influence of advertisers is overstated, and the influence of the audience itself is understated. I think that's true of media companies in general. With Twitter and the Twitter files and the pressure, I mean, it wasn't just that like employees were complaining they wanted to do this. I mean, some of their general counsel was a high-ranking FBI agent. I mean, not at the time he was working for Twitter, but he went from the FBI to Twitter.
I don't think you ever leave, by the way.
Yeah, right. I know. Yeah. So he's operating with institutional protection for national security. And the way that the FBI and other agencies would threaten the companies, because it has to be First Amendment compliant, they know that. They're smart. They know they can't tell Twitter or Facebook, you have to do this. What they'll say is, well, these are all our concerns about all these accounts that are Russian. These are Russian propagandists. These are Russian accounts. These are bots. These are fake people. Your platform is compromised by foreign agents. That foreign hook, by the way, is why I'm so alarmed by this Restrict Act that would ban TikTok. It's all about foreign threats. Well, the government has taken the position that our American companies are infiltrated by foreign disinformation networks, which is not true. It's substantially false, but they have taken that position. And then the main thing is that the mainstream media backed them up. That was ultimately the punishment, the stick of the carrot and the stick was, well, if you don't do anything about this is coming from the FBI. You know, what are we supposed to say when the New York Times asked us experts about national security if Twitter is a safe place, if it's taking the threat to democracy seriously? And so that's a sort of advertising adjacent, because ultimately the social media company is alarmed that its shareholders will be mad, its price will go down because the mainstream media is bashing them and saying that they're Russian propagandist organizations for not taking stronger action against speech. So that was the main way the punishment was exacted. And then also hearings. They'll say, and also there's a hearing on Capitol Hill next week where we're going to be exploring, some Democratic majority is going to be exploring the threats to democracy and integrity on social media. And we're going to have this report on how you've done a really bad job of this, unless you're going to, unless here's some accounts you could take action on.
Yeah.
That's what happened. And it's terrible.
Thank you for joining me today on Kibbe on Liberty and for being part of our fiercely independent audience. Every week, my organization, Free the People, partners with blazetv to bring you this show. My guests bring smart perspectives on everything from current events to timeless philosophical debates. If you like what you hear, go to freethepeople.org/KOL and support Kibbe on Liberty so we can continue to produce these honest conversations with interesting people. Now, let's get back to it. Well, I wonder why it started, and I think everything you're saying is true, but I think the incentives aligned because of financial interest as well. And I specifically, these are hard numbers to find, and I feel like it should be easy to find out how much does the federal government spend on social media advertising every year. And I couldn't find that, but even though that should be readily available, and maybe someone smarter than me can find it. But I did find one article in Roll Call that and this is during the Trump administration, that 250 to 300 million was pulled from the CDC's vaccine budget, whatever that was, for social media advertising. So they're promoting not just their health guidance, but that's 300 million is like real money. That has to have some influence on it as well. I've never heard anyone say this, but I would love to write legislation to ban the government spending money to convince me with my own tax dollars what I don't believe.
Well, and you want to talk about solutions. That's ultimately what I want to do, is not regulate how the social media companies respond to this kind of thing, because that is very thorny. It potentially violates some of our principles, and it kind of, in a very obvious way, violates the First Amendment if we're trying to tell them what to do. The whole problem is them being told what to do. We can constrain government actors from talking to them. I would like to have more checks on, maybe the FBI agent who's flagging jokes all day doesn't need to have that job. Maybe the CDC official, who's doing weekly conference calls on, well, here's what we're seeing and here's what we're worried about, and we think this could cause vaccine skepticism, or, hey, there's this viral post about Dr. Fauci, calling out his hypocrisy or his changing his mind about masks or something else. And we're really worried about that. Is that going to get turned down, or what's up with that?
Yeah.
That kind of thing has to end. And was, I think, represents the main free speech issue we faced.
I still remember on the NIH website when I was doing research on this 2 years ago, Fauci has a whole media page, or at least he did. And there was clearly a substantial amount of government money used to propagandize their opinions about things. And I just think the whole idea of the government taking taxpayer dollars to re-educate us, I could just cut that part of the budget and think of the savings on interest alone.
I said today on my show about, I can't even remember what I said this about, some public program. I said it's one of the worst ways I can think of for the government to spend money. And I stopped. No, it isn't. There are 100 others I can also just as bad or worse.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The but going back to TikTok and China, like the thing that I've struggled to understand, and I'm just starting to pay attention to this issue thanks to the reporting that you and others have done. The very definition of enemies of the United States, that's an empty vessel. Like that could be anybody. Who's our enemy?
Right. We're not. I mean, we haven't declared war on China. Yeah. We haven't even declared war on Russia. We're fighting a kind of proxy war.
We haven't declared war. I'm not sure we have any declared wars right now, as I recall.
The global war on terrorism, wherever and whenever it occurs.
So, China is obviously the enemy that they're talking about in this particular case, but we are simultaneously have been financing very dangerous gain-of-function research in China. We can't get the data from China about what actually happened there. And I'm thinking to myself, if China's the enemy, why did you ever do that? It doesn't make any, that's another rabbit hole that I could spend too much time on. But I'm wondering, it just means that the enemy is whatever they say it is at the moment they say it. So it'll be weaponized against whoever is saying something they don't like. Americans they don't like.
On social media, we saw this so clearly with the Russia Gate aspect of this. The mainstream media, I blame them a lot. They're so complicit in this. After Trump's win in 2016, the mainstream media seized upon the idea that the reason this happened, something they didn't predict and didn't think was possible, was because of Russian influence on social media. Because Facebook, in particular, Mark Zuckerberg, remember when he became the Democrats' greatest enemy ever, overnight, because they decided that he had not taken down enough content from deliberate bad actors in Russia. Russian agents who were setting up bot accounts and were targeting swing voters with misinformation or trying to make them have a bad opinion of Hillary. That was why Trump won. That is not true. It has been debunked so many times, not just by right-wing people or libertarian, but by
laughably
mainstream people, political scientists who have studied this, tech experts, believe the experts, say this campaign was not nearly as pervasive as you made it out to be. It did not correctly target swing voters. Like a tiny minority of social media users actually saw the accounts in question. Cambridge Analytica is the most misrepresented scandal of all time. This was, data that supposedly this British company had that was none of that is true. They were overstating. People in the tech sector often overstate what they've been able to accomplish in order to attract investors and get glorious profiles. Look at how we hacked the human brain. Now we can, this has been being debunked since the 1960s, right? Since the Mad Men era, when they thought subliminal messages, that was the end of individual control because of advertising. None of that was true. It's that all over again. So the idea, and by the way, for the 2016 election, we're talking about, it was blue collar, older voters in a couple thousand of them in Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. They listen to a lot of talk radio. They watch a lot of cable news. Those platforms for speech are far more biased, and where you're going to get, depending on what you're listening to, you're going to get relentless pro-Trump or relentless anti-Trump, depending on what you're listening to. Social media is not like that. Social media, you will see other opinions. Even if you really just want to see the opinion that confirms what you're saying, it is far more diverse than TV, radio, newspaper, all those other things. So the idea that Facebook was uniquely influential here, it makes no sense. What the Russians spent dwarfed what the candidates spent on their campaigns. It wasn't even close. So it was such a stupid idea, but because it has this foreign interference element to it, the mainstream media and national security states' buy-in for that idea has resulted in so many bad speech policies. And the same thing would happen with this TikTok Restrict Act.
If you've made it this far into the show, it means I must be doing something right. Kibbe on Liberty is just one of the amazing products we created for the people. We tell emotionally compelling stories and produce educational videos for the liberty curious. Our award-winning documentaries personalize all things liberty, independence, creativity, hard work, integrity, and perseverance. After the show, check out our work at freethepeople.org. And if you like what you see, donate to support what we do. That's freethepeople.org. Now back to the show. So what is the viability of this idea? It seems to have legs, and the Biden administration has endorsed it. A disturbing number of Senate Republicans. Kevin McCarthy says he wants to do something. This looks really dangerous.
Yeah, the position I usually take on these things is like, if Biden, Elizabeth Warren, those kind of people think this Republican idea is a good idea, then probably it's a bad idea, right? They tend to endorse things like they want more power for democratic progressive ideas.
Yeah.
So if they agree with your idea to change Section 230, which is this law to govern the internet, or to break up these companies, if they think that's a good idea, they probably think that the outcome would be it would hurt conservative speech. And in fact, I think that would be the outcome of a lot of these things. So it's like, why are they on your side? I know some people love bipartisanship. They think, well, if all these Republicans and all these Democrats agree, it must be a good idea. Like, no.
The opposite is true.
It's probably an idea that further entrenches government bureaucracies and grows their power.
This what mystifies me about so-called national conservatives who have fully embraced the idea that we're going to use the power of the state to impose their values instead of the other guy's values. And I'm like, do you really think Elizabeth Warren is going to do that? And part of it is this fantasy that somehow they have permanent control of the levers of power. It's such a dumb way of thinking. It's hard to take that seriously, but that's where they're coming from.
They take it. It is hard. I find it hard to take seriously. They take it very seriously. I mean, it's this idea was discredited at like the Council of Elrond when Boromir says, "No, the ring is a gift. We must use it," and then everyone explains why that's a really dumb idea, and it just has to be destroyed. It's similar to that. And I always try to explain to national conservative people that, like, even if you can win once and you get in some good people, it will trend toward Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren, I'm not just like scapegoating her here. She is the manifestation of the state. The state, the people who man the bureaucracies, the people who are on the commissions to decide what acceptable speech is and acceptable regulation and what's fair competition and all those other things, they are Elizabeth Warrens. They are people who share her progressive ideology. At the end of the day, as mad as you are at, Facebook for taking down a pro-life account or something, the people at the end of the day who will be enforcing the rules will not care. You can't make them. We'll never staff these bureaucracies with the right people. It's just, it cannot work. It's so obvious that it can't work. Shrinking these bureaucracies, constraining the rules that they have, the tools that they have, that seems actually easier to me. I know I'm not saying it's easy. It's very hard to stop the government from growing. It's very hard to do that. I'm not saying we've been tremendously successful, but it seems easy compared to permanently winning and installing all the right people and then making sure the non-political people under them always have the right ideas, and we'll be at this forever. I don't know.
And I guess the good news is that some of the Republicans that they would say sort of trend towards that populist national conservatism stuff are reacting against this, and it's the neocons who are the ones who are like, yeah, let's do this. Mitt Romney obviously thinks this is a great idea because you can't actually have all the wars that he wants to have if people are allowed to publicly criticize them. But the whole thing is confusing to me.
Look, obviously national conservatives are they're very anti-neocon, so like I appreciate some of their foreign policy ideas aligning with my own. I'm glad that there are Republican members who I don't agree with on a lot of stuff, but are fighting Kevin McCarthy to scrutinize Ukraine spending, or like how many more checks are we going to write? Is there any plan to compel these sides to negotiate? Biden says we're going to support them no matter what they do till the end of time. I don't think the American people even feel that way about it. So I'm not like, I want to work with people when I agree with them. That's true of people on the left. That's true of people on the more populist right. But I don't like the direction the right has taken, except on foreign policy. On foreign policy, there has been a healthy corrective that Trump somewhat clumsily encapsulated at times, although it was a very insincere commitment, and he surrounded himself with a lot of the same people who did a lot of the same things, as you well know. So I appreciate that the neocons have lost on foreign policy, but on a lot of other, and foreign policy is very important, don't get me wrong. It's like the thing where the president is least constrained to do whatever he wants, and the temptation to do what the blob wants must be very seductive, because everyone from, Barack Obama vowed to end these wars. He, engaged in drone warfare. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It seems very difficult to overcome, because people who even ran explicitly on overcoming it were instead subsumed by it. So I appreciate the foreign policy changes in the Republican Party. I think on a lot of other stuff, it's taking bad direction. Even on some of the culture stuff, where I support free speech and fighting wokeness when it comes to really dumb speech restrictions and some of the excesses of the left. I want to fight kind of in the realm of ideas, but even that stuff they kind of overdo in a way that would lends itself toward just having big government. We're going to fight over like porn and drag shows and all. Like, I don't want to fight the battle over like what the curriculum should even be in the public school. I want to go to the school that aligns with your values and your family's values, and there should be choice, rather than we have to win the battle of who's writing the curriculum always and every time, and then everyone will do that. It's not the approach I want to take, and it's the direction on the right.
Well, so I draw a bright dividing line when it comes to drag shows and curriculum. If it's a government entity doing it, I'm all for banning it, or I'm all for parents demanding that they ban it, and it's usually done by state governments, because as long as schools are government schools, the curriculum will be political, and someone's going to decide what your children are allowed to read and not allowed to read. But obviously the libertarian solution is, well, it shouldn't be political. It shouldn't be government. It should be alternatives that allow parents to make those decisions for themselves.
And wouldn't that be a healthier thing for our society if, instead of having these really toxic, winner-takes-all, bitter debates, we could just you do it the way you want and you do it the way you want. I don't love the kind of national divorce framing that some in the libertarian movement are using, because I think that's a very actually harsh and like battle-ready way of phrasing what this idea is. And actually, but if the idea is devolving to more not just local control but individual control, where you can take the money if we're spending money on public education anyway, you take the money that you're going to get per pupil spending and find the educational environment that works for you, and you don't get to tell someone else's family. And if they're a liberal family and they want a more whatever kind of experience aligns with that, that's fine. And if you want something else, that's fine. That's the way in which we're not constantly battling each other.
Yeah.
And that seems so peaceful and beautiful and healthy for our society.
It seems so obvious, and I don't think we have to get divorced in order to do that.
No, let's not phrase it like that. That's a nasty thing.
Yeah. So much of libertarian vernacular, it just, like, I don't want to get divorced. That sounds bad.
It does sound bad. I don't either.
Like a bad thing.
We're happily married men. We don't want to do it.
But I do want to live freely, and I want to make choices for myself. And I feel like there is this beautiful cooperative version of libertarianism that is the alternative to, and Mike Lee, of all people, who's very much a constitutional federalist, has pointed out that all of this hostility that we see at the top, particularly fighting over the presidency and who controls the agency so that they get to determine our speech, if we would get back to a more decentralized model, and he talks very much about states' rights, I think we take it a little bit further and say, you know what, it's really about the individual, and even the state doesn't get to tell you how to live your life, but at least then you have a little bit of freedom to move from New York City to Florida should they get so authoritarian.
Absolutely.
But I think, and this is, I want to ask you this here. We were talking about it before we went live. This should be, we say this too much, but this should be the libertarian moment. And I'm seeing a lot of former people from the progressive left that were so horrified by lockdowns and vaccine mandates and all of this top-down authoritarianism that came out of COVID. There seems to be a new coalition emerging, and some of these populist Republicans are part of that coalition. Joe Rogan's probably part of that coalition. All of these former lefty comedians who are now realizing that the government doesn't actually want you to think for yourself. That to me is the new libertarian coalition, and it's going to be messy. It's going to be sloppy because we're going to have all sorts of things we disagree on, but we're looking for decentralized local solutions. We're looking always for free speech in the public square. We're looking for bodily autonomy and all these things. Like, these are libertarian principles, and we could build a coalition around that, but we probably just need to stop fighting with each other so much.
Absolutely. I think opposition to COVID mandates and COVID restrictions, I hope there aren't any of them left to fight, but of course we know there will be, should be a significant part of the ongoing libertarian project. These were very, very serious restrictions on our rights, just literal restrictions, and also the ideology behind them was so anathema to the libertarian project, was so, well, just listen to experts. Experts know, they're better. We gotta listen. We gotta trust the people in charge. That was really what we were told. That you were, you hated, you were anti-science. It's a version of the you're not a patriot. You're not a patriot. You're unpatriotic if you don't support this war effort. There are just so many parallels between, TSA style security. I worried we were going to be required to wear masks for the rest of our lives on planes and people would say, well, why do you, no, it's going to go away. I'm like, well, I still have to take my belt off. Oh, hello, kitty. I would say
that was very graceful, buddy.
I still have to take my belt off to get on a plane.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make any sense. There's actually, you can't even find an expert who thinks that makes us any safer whatsoever. But we still do it because the state is sticky. Things stick around. So I think, yes, uniting people who are frustrated with
he's photobombing your shot.
With the lockdowns.
What do you think, buddy?
We have a great debate in Reason Magazine this month.
Yeah, we should just talk about
what's
this.
more libertarian, dogs or cats?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm not sure which side your cat is making right
now.
Well,
so he is not violating the NAP because this is actually his table.
Correct.
And this is his studio, and he's letting us use it. But we're very strongly in the cats or libertarian camp here. And his name is Rourke. So these are not just libertarian cats; these are hardcore objectivist cats.
It's beautiful.
So, but the problem with dogs is that they're probably communists. They're always looking for a handout. And you're a dog lover.
I am a dog owner. I'm a pet lover. I didn't grow up that way. I came to my love of pets from having acquired my dogs.
Mm-hmm.
They're wonderful. I love them. And now I like cats too. I'm mildly allergic, so I probably could never have one. But I love them. They're great. I love my dogs. Yes, if I had to weigh in on this debate, I think the dogs are so needy.
Yeah.
And so attention. One of my dogs is named Caesar. I actually think of him as a little socialist because he just has your space is his space, is very much his ideology.
Yeah.
So.
But I like it because most people don't care about the dead Austrian economists that I love so much. But they so passionately care about their pets, like they're part of their families.
Yes.
And pets in America are the ultimate luxury good that have been made available to us by the prosperity created by markets.
Sometimes I look at my dogs. So my dogs they're tiny dogs. They're little Yorkies. They're like 8 pounds each. And I just look at you and go, thousands of years ago, like you were a wolf, and your job, you were supposed to hunt and kill and keep humans safe.
Yeah.
And then you realized over centuries of evolution that the cuddlier you were, the more we would just take care of you without asking much on your part. It used to be more of a mutual trade because the dogs would get, in the hunter-gatherer world, right? They would get table scraps and everything. They had placed by the fire, but they had to bark and make a lot of noise if dangerous animals were coming or like a rival tribe or something. They had to engage in the hunting and the killing. Now they're pretty pampered.
Now they just sit on the couch.
They took advantage of this. This is Trump should run on the unequal trades, right? This is the trade deficit between humans and dogs.
So what? Let's try to be optimistic because you could look at all of this surveillance and the way that our government seems to be systematically implementing all the pieces of the Chinese social credit system. Not starting with lockdowns, but we've seen attempts at debanking and all of these things that we're seeing in China. And you could get pretty pessimistic about the future of freedom in this country. What's the thing that's going to stop the government from doing this stuff to us?
The First Amendment. We have something nobody else has. We have the First Amendment. Baby, it's awesome. And our Supreme Court is very good on First Amendment issues. They really are, all 9 of them. Honestly, this court is more pro-free speech than probably any court that has ever come before it. They really take a libertarian free market, the best ideas should prevail. They read this protection very broadly, and it's a beautiful thing. Obviously, they said, the horrible Westboro Baptist Church, right? They get to say vile, horrific things at military service members' funeral. That's awful. But that kind of protection for free speech is so vital. You have to that level of desire to defend free speech, which is what they have. So, and our European counterparts don't have that. That's why they have privacy laws and all sorts of things that we don't have to contend with. So we will always be different because we have a protection for free speech that is unprecedented on this earth and unprecedented throughout all of human history.
And as you pointed out, the fact that we're having this conversation and we have distribution and there are thousands of programs like this that platform libertarian values in a way that just wasn't possible when I was a kid. Like the networks were not going to talk about some of these things. That has to be an opportunity. Like if we actually think our ideas are that powerful, let's try to get to a marketplace. So I think I can be optimistic, although on a daily basis I get really pessimistic about the things I see happening.
And we talk about a lot of pessimistic things because we want to be watchdogs and we want to call out government abuse and all those sorts of things, and we should continue to do that. But you're right that there's a very positive story to tell about the trajectory of speech online. That's what we're seeing.
Okay, so since Rourke is crashing this show, where can people find the cats versus dog debates in the latest edition?
So yes, it's in the latest edition of Reason. I'm not sure when it hits stands. I think it's any day now. I got a copy of it in the office, but it's our debate issue. So the whole issue is debates. So it's a debate issue for libertarians. What issues are libertarians divided on? We had a great piece in there on what to do about the homeless problem in D.C., for instance, the tent cities and that kind of crime. What to think about immigration. There's some other really great debates in there. The fun one is the cats and dogs one, which you should definitely read, but we also are taking the issue very seriously.
And your show, did I mispronounce it? It's called Rising or The Rising?
It's called Rising, but it's either way is fine. It's a YouTube show for the publication The Hill. We air every day, or Monday through Thursdays, and you can find it on YouTube. Just search Rising or The Hill or my name, and you'll see it. And
finally, how do people find you?
So you should watch me there. You should read me at reason.com, or follow me on Twitter, just my name. I'll be there as long as that site is. I'm not sure how I like Elon Musk and a lot of the transparency he brought to Twitter. I don't know that I'm going to pay for a blue check. He's trying to strong arm us into subscribing and doing a whole sort of other things. I don't know about this, man.
Did you have a blue check in the old regime?
I have a blue check now.
Okay. But it's the old one.
Well, now you're going to be a peasant unless you pay for it. It's kind of like a French Revolution is occurring. The landed gentry no longer have the right to just have a blue check naturally, which I totally understand. But I think I would be more for it if I was clear what the benefits of subscribing are going to be. It seems like a lot of Twitter policies are now changing like on a daily basis, and that creates a lot of uncertainty, and I don't think it's a good model. Again, I'm thankful to Elon for the transparency he's brought and for releasing the Twitter files, and I don't have there's so much reflexive anti-Elon sentiment everywhere, including on Twitter, but I also think a little bit more continuity would be helpful for the platform, frankly.
Well, apparently that's his style. He ideates and is just kind of throwing things out to see if it works. Yeah. But I agree. Massey had a tweet, I think Thomas Massey had a tweet today where he said that if it's free, it means that you are the product.
Yes.
And I sort of agree with him. And I very much support the idea that I would pay for a place where not only my voice would be unfettered, but of having access to things. So I don't think he's necessarily on the wrong track. And I was also as much as it's demonized. I was a legacy blue check.
Oh, there you go.
And the only reason I was is that the organization I was with at the time, I had enough people to sort of spend the time to badger them into giving that to me. And I think I got it in 2008 or something.
Yeah, that was not a great system, but my main issue is Twitter used to tell me its recommendations used to be pretty tailored to what I actually wanted recommended to me. Like if tweets from my colleagues at Reason, if I missed them, I would see them. Now that system's a little bit broken.
Yeah,
I think I'm seeing things like, why am I seeing this?
I think whatever Twitter is going to become, it's not there yet. But that again, like I've always assumed that innovation is part of the solution to this censorship problem, but they just have to be free from too much government coercion to get there.
Absolutely, and we know a lot about the government coercion thanks to what happened, and it was beyond my wildest imagination. And since I'm a libertarian, I'm capable to imagine a lot of government wrongdoing, and even given that, I was shocked and appalled.
All right, well, Rourke wants his nap, so we got to wrap this up. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you liked the conversation, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and also ring the bell for notifications. And if you want to know more about Free the People, go to freethepeople.org.